have, we're going to start in the middle and go both ways. So you can see the whole process in an hour and a half. Otherwise, the rising time would limit what you could see actually. So this morning earlier, I mixed up a batch of bread and it's ready to go into the loaves. So we're going to start by putting the bread into the loaves, and then we're going to start by mixing up a new batch. So you'll see it from the beginning all the way to the point where you're going to see it now. Just the tools that we're going to use today is a bowl. And you don't have to have this big of a bowl, but I like this because I do the whole process in the bowl. I don't put it on the cabinet except to put it into loaves. So it's all done here. And a mixing spoon that I washed. This is our tool, and a tablespoon. That's all we need. So right now we're going to put what I did this morning into loaves. And to separate it out, there's really nothing but a bread knife. So instead of rising in my big bowl, since I want to use my big bowl and have it clean, I put it into these to rise. You don't want it to fall. You want to beat it down. You don't want it to fall on its own. So I hope I divided this about half, so we're going to have 3 loaves in each one. I bake 6 loaves at a time because that's what fits in my oven. And I don't like to have a half-empty oven. So if you'll forgive me today, I will make 6 loaves. Your recipe says 4, but I'm just going to add a little bit to it here. So I'm going to try to divide this into 3. And knead it just like you would be kneading it at the beginning, and put it into loaf pans. To do that, I just turn it round and around, stretching it out as I go. So the top should be fairly smooth. I'm putting it into a pan. And then I used to just try to keep it in that shape. My grandson was helping me bake one day, and I said, "This is your loaf," and he fixed it, he put it in, he flattened it completely out, and I said, "No, David, don't do that." He says, "Yes, Granny, and I like it better." So that's what I do. I flatten it out, set it aside. I didn't take as much time trying to divide these up as I should have.
Sister Joanne, is the pan greased?
I knew somebody was going to ask me that. I do not grease my pans. If you use a glass pan, you would have to grease it. The metal pans, I don't grease them, I don't wash them.
Really?
I make my bread, dump it out, let it cool, and put it back under the stove. And nothing sticks. It's a clean pan. I use just enough flour to keep it from sticking. And I do oil the pan to let it rise so it dumps out easily. And I don't usually have to put too much flour on the counter to make it into the loaf. A lot of that depends upon how you ended your kneading. If you're a little bit moist or if you're a little bit dry.
Yes, you can.
Then remember, you punch that down. You don't let it fall.
Joanne,
You cut this, you don't tear it.
they can't hear me.
Can you hear? I'm sorry, were you asking a question?
Oh, yes, Joanne, this is Roseanne. We have such poor service here. I was just wondering, if you make rolls instead of bread, it would just be the same recipe?
I use the same recipe, I do. They use the same recipe.
Okay.
and just make it into rolls. And what I would do making rolls, I would roll it out flat and use a cutter like this, just to make it round, and then put it in the pans. Well, I put it in a large pan.
How close together do you place the rolls?
I put them where they just touch, and they're very shallow.
Okay.
They're very shallow. So as they rise, they will spread.
And did they have to rise the same amount of time as the bread?
Approximately, yes. You have you go by looks because it's all depending on the warmth of the dough, the warmth of the house. You don't want any breezes getting on it, so you want your windows and doors shut when you're baking.
And the fan off.
And the fan off.
Ceiling fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They never tell you that in the recipes. A little secret right there.
I was going to make a loaf of raisin bread here, and I forgot to get my raisins ready. So to make raisin bread, you would simply roll it out with a rolling pin. So you've got a long, you'd put your little bit of butter, a little cinnamon, little raisins, and then you just roll it like this. Put it in the pan. I'll do it on the next batch, but if you want to stick around to see it go in the pans. Okay, that's the process of making a loaf. When I beat the thing, I put my thumb inside my fingers. That way you don't get your thumb hurt when you're beating your bread. All right, and it's going to sit there while we mix up some bread. Let's see. I did add a little extra yeast to this batch just so it would go faster. So that will go in the oven shortly here. So here's our beginning. This is my pan, and I'm going to, I use a 1 cup measuring cup, and I'm going to step right here to the sink and put warm water in it. You don't want it hot. You don't want it cold because you want the warmth for the yeast to work, but you don't want to kill the yeast by getting it too hot. So as long as it's not, it's just nice and warm to the touch. I'm making 6 loaves again, so Pastor sent you a recipe for 4 loaves. And I'll tell you what I'm putting in for 6 loaves so you can compare and do whatever your oven does or what you need. My yeast, I buy it in a bag, the blocks, and I just put it into my containers here. But for 6 loaves, I put 7 cups of water in. The rule is a cup of water per loaf. I find that just a little bit more makes my loaves just about the size I like them. So I put 7 cups of warm water, and I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of yeast. And I just sprinkle it. I don't know if you can see inside the bowl, so it doesn't clump as I put it in the water. And this will dissolve in. And I measured out my sugar. I have 4 tablespoons of sugar here, and I just sprinkle that over the top. This loaf, this batch, I put brown sugar in. This sprinkles better on the top just to kind of cover your yeast and make it start going. That's the beginning, and I don't like to put my spoon in it yet because the yeast just kind of glumps on it. So I just kind of let it sit with the sugar on it. And then I start adding some of the other things while it starts to bubble. One optional thing is gluten flour, especially if you use all-purpose white flour or mostly wheat flour. A little bit of gluten flour helps the bread stick together and just gives it a nice texture at the end. So I put maybe a half a tablespoon per loaf. So I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of this in. Gluten flour will clump real easy. So I sprinkle it around too, so it doesn't clump. That's an optional. You don't have to do that. And then salt. Salt does retard the yeast. So people say don't put it in until your yeast is bubbling good. I don't find a lot of difference in my doing it, so I just get it in there. Otherwise, I tend to forget it. For 6 loaves, I don't like things salty, so I put just a heaping tablespoon in. A lot of people would say that's not enough yeast. I mean, not enough salt. For me, it is, so that's what I do. You could add a little bit more if you like. Then the oil, and then flour. So for this pan of 6 loaves, I'm going to put 2/3 of a cup of oil in. And instead of dirtying my measuring cup with oil that's hard to rinse out, I'm just going to use my spoon. I've measured my spoon, and I know that if I put 6 tablespoons or 6 of these big spoons in, I'm putting 2/3 of a cup of oil in. And that gives me a big spoon like this for each loaf of bread. How many is that? Anybody counting?
No, I'm not counting.
We're just mesmerized and watching.
That's okay. Whoops. Another option is oatmeal. So I'm going to put a cup of oatmeal in. Again, that's purely optional. You can put wheat germ, oat bran, sesame. I like sesame seeds because when you toast it, it brings out the flavor of the sesame seed. So I'm just going to add some sesame seeds. As you can see, I didn't measure that real well, but that's the way I bake bread. And then flour. Can you see it bubbling? Starting to bubble there?
Yeah, I can see it.
Bubbles are starting to come out.
Look at that. That's amazing.
There's another way that is taught to do this, is to put your yeast in a half a cup of water, warm water, in a measuring cup, a large measuring cup, a 2 cup, and put your yeast and your sugar in that, and it'll bubble up there, kind of a thick bubbly thing. When you put it into your bread, you're not getting all the yeast out, and it dirties one more dish. And so this is the way I do it, and it works fine. So you just have to give it a little time to be sure that your yeast is working. I want you to see it bubble real good. I don't know. You can start to see bubbles coming up from the bottom. Once I know it's working well, then I will stir it, start my flour. Rule of thumb, there's 3 cups of flour to a loaf of bread. 3 cups of flour to 1 cup of water. Recall that I've already put 1 cup of oatmeal in. So I like to make it as whole wheaty as I can. So I put this around the edges for 2 reasons. One, just to give the yeast a little bit more time while I'm doing this to work itself without being hindered. And it just keeps my pan cleaner if I put flour on the edges as I go. 4, 5, 6. I'm going to stop there and stir it. So I don't know if you can see, I just kind of scrape the bowl around like this as I'm stirring, putting the flour into the water. And then this is a time to start the gluten really working. So I take my spoon and just flat down at the bottom and do that. It's kind of like you're using still a little bit wet to do that. It's kind of like using a gravy stirrer. You're stirring it good, just on the bottom, scraping it around on the bottom in a circular motion. And that starts, it's kind of like the kneading process in the wet stage. You're working the gluten out of the flour, and it makes your bread have a nice texture. I don't think you can over knead your flour, your bread. I don't, never heard anybody saying they did. So I'm going to put a dozen cups of whole wheat flour in here. 3 more. 5, 6, and that's going to be my whole wheat flour. So there's 12 cups of whole wheat flour, and again I stir it, just scraping the edges. You just kind of have to hold it like this because it's getting thicker now. It's not quite to the kneading stage yet, though. It's still wet, still enough that you can beat it good with a spoon. Then the white flour. I like to use bread flour. I think this is some I got from Sharp Shopper. It's called Minnesota hard wheat flour, unbleached. So I'm going to put flour in slower now because it's getting thicker and I don't want to overdo flour. So again, from the sides, scraping it as I go. Scraping it all the way down, trying to get it underneath the dough. My purpose at this point is to get it where I can get my hands in it without having it stick to my hands. I'm going to abandon my measuring cup now and just be sprinkling. Is that right? All right, it's gotten where the spoon is obsolete. I take a little flour and just clean my spoon off. I don't like to lose anything. And I'm ready to spoon. And I have a little stool, I don't know, 8 inches tall maybe. And it's like doing CPR. You can do it better if you're on top of it, not trying to lean into it. So now I'm going to be sure flour is underneath me. And I'm going to start, you have to start slow to start with. You want to try to keep enough flour that it doesn't stick to you. At this point, you want to add only the flour that you need. The purpose isn't just to get another 3 cups of flour in here, or 2 cups because I put oatmeal in. If you do get a little sticky, it's just a little flour and it comes off. In kneading, you just have to kind of feel it. If you've done it before, if you haven't, you'll learn just by feeling it. You're pulling your bread up towards you and then pushing down with the heel of your hand. You're pulling it up with your finger, pushing it down with the heel of your hand. Try to keep it from sticking on the bottom just with flour. Now I'm going to set a timer here unless somebody's got a timer for me.
How much time do you need on the timer?
I put 10 minutes.
10.
I need
Okay.
10 minutes by the clock.
Okay. I'll set my timer for 10 as well too.
When I'm ready to actually do the kneading. I'm mixed and I'm kneading now. So if you want me to slow down, show you what I'm doing, I'm pulling it up with my fingers and down with the heel of my hand. So up, down, up, down. And this too is working the gluten. The way you knead it and how long you knead it will give the texture of the bread. If you don't knead it as long, it'll be more airy and not as solid loaf. Still a little sticky, trying to stick. You do have to add a little bit of flour all the way through your kneading, but it will get less and less as you get into the process, because your dough is getting the right consistency of flour to the water that you put. Starting to feel sticky to my hands. I add a little bit more. I'm going to turn on the oven real quick because that bread's getting close. I don't know if you can see the bread bumping up under there. See the loaves rising?
Yes. Oh man, that's beautiful.
You cover it because you don't want the tops to dry out, get a crust on them. You want them to stay moist so that it will rise evenly without a crust over them. When you put it in the oven, it will form a crust very quickly, and it kills the yeast also. That stops the yeast growth. And so the bread won't rise anymore. It may give if you put it in too soon, the crust will form, but the bread will continue to try to rise until the yeast is killed, and they'll leave you a big crack on the side of the loaf. And that's just a clue that you put it in too soon. It needed to rise just a little bit more. So you just judge, double, as big as you think you want the bread to get, and in it goes. How are we coming with time?
We have 6 minutes on my clock. 6 minutes, 18 seconds. Sister Joanna, I think this is a good workout too, right? Because you're kneading with your hands.
It's a very good workout. This is the second time I've done it this morning, and my hands are tired, my wrists are tired, and but standing up above it like this, you're putting your weight down on it, so it's not as hard as if you were standing trying to reach up and knead. So always be above your bread when you knead it. Stand over it and be above it.
And for everyone that's listening, we are also recording this session so that way we can have it for playback for later. But please, if you have friends that you know would enjoy this experience, feel free to share the Zoom information. Even right now, let them join in on this experience as well, too.
Like right now, I'm got a little sticky spot down under here. You can scrape it off and just put it back in your bread. It'll move back in. Pull it back with your fingers, down with the palms of your hands. So you're giving the bread. You know, if you think you're tired, the bread's probably getting pretty beat up. Notice I don't put a lot of flour in at a time. My purpose isn't to make the bread drier. My purpose is just to keep it from sticky. If it starts feeling a little sticky, that's when I add.
I feel a good workout just watching you. We've got 4 minutes on the clock.
You miss this, Michelle, when you use the bread maker.
Sister Michelle had to tune out to go to work, but I'm recording. I will let her know all that she's pissing out on. We'll probably end up taking turns, tag teaming.
Yeah. Well, one of you will probably get the hang of the kneading quicker than the other. You may be stuck with it once you get the hang of it.
Yeah. That would definitely be her.
My kids like to help me make bread, my grandkids. Of course, they're small, and this big pan of bread is a little overwhelming, but they like to try. They like the cinnamon roll process. I'm feeling a little less sticky as I'm going.
Okay, you're at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay.
And church family, just letting you know, if you make your own bread, you're going to burn so many calories that when you eat it, you're not going to gain as much, right?
My oven is hot, so when we finish this meeting, we'll put the bread in. I think it's about ready.
1 minute, 50 seconds.
You notice I'm going slower, not so much because I'm tired, although I am, but the bread is much more elastic. When you punch it, it pops right back out. You know you're pretty much done.
That's awesome.
Set a timer. That's the way you can judge when you should be done. It's hard to push in, as well as it's very elastic, and it pops right back out at you. Tell me when we're down to this.
All right, we're in that final countdown. We've got 30 seconds remaining. And once we get to 10 seconds, I'll count it down like NASA.
All right. I like to see it go down because I don't want to put too much flour in right at the end. I want to be able to have a clean bowl.
Okay, and now we're down to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, and see, I didn't put any flour in there at the end. I'm not feeling sticky, so it's just turned out perfectly. I've got my oil done, I mean my bread kneaded. It's the elastic stage and it's not sticky. I put just a little oil in my hand and I spread it around my bread, oil the pan. So I'm oiling the pan all the way from the top to the bottom. There's some dough kind of stuck to the bottom of the pan, there always is. Doesn't take much. And then I turn the dough over, and this is where you can beat it good. The frustration that you might have left, get it out right here. And then my oily hand, I just kind of tap the top of it. And there it is, ready to rise. It won't take quite as much to rise, or rather, it will take the full time to rise here because I didn't add any extra yeast. This is 3 tablespoons. I put 4 in the first batch, just so it would go faster. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick just so I won't be sticky here. All right, let's see if we can let you, you want to see the bread go in, or are you good with me just putting it in?
Yeah, let's see if we can see how you put it in. Maybe there's a trade secret putting it in.
Let's see if I can tip the phone in that direction. I don't know.
Awesome. And for everyone that's viewing, Sister Joanne is just doing this straight from her phone. So if you're thinking you've got a talent, if you've got a talent that you want to share, you can just live stream right from your phone. I'll help you set up the Zoom on your phone so that way you can stream it and share with the rest of us.
Let me just show you the bread before I put it in the oven. Can you see that?
Oh, yes, it's looking great.
Some loaves are a little bit smaller than others. I just didn't divide it real well. When I divided it in half, I got a little bit more in the first half. It was a little bit bigger. But they're going to be good. Can you see my oven?
Yes. Now, as you're putting it in the oven, what's the temperature that you set it at? And gas or electric oven, which is the temperature the same for?
Electric oven, I go 425
Okay.
for 15 minutes. And that's the way 6 loaves fit into my oven. So I have 15 minutes set for 425, and then I turn it down to 325 for 25 minutes. And then it's ready for it to come out. I'm going to set this down here. Now you say, why are you cleaning your cabinet? It's just flour. Right here where I was kneading, the aluminum bowl, when I'm constantly turning it for 10 minutes, it will rub off a little bit of a dark residue, which I don't like to get into my loaves of bread, so I clean it off before I use the cabinet here to make the loaves. You can see a little bit of dark on my dish rag. Just from the rubbing for 10 minutes, turning the bowl around and around. Any questions from anyone?
All right, everyone, you can unmute and feel free to ask questions. Sister Roseanne, any questions?
No, I just think your bread is the best in the world.
Well, I don't know best in the world, but it's good. I like my bread. So my kids grew up on.
So in terms of someone getting into the hobby, is it more expensive to make your bread than to buy bread? I'm just throwing out a silly question.
It takes about 5 pounds to make 6 loaves,
Okay.
approximately. And then of course you've got oil, yeast, and salt. Which if you buy your yeast, and to show you how I get yeast. This was $4.09, and 3 tablespoons for 6 loaves of bread. It goes, lasts a long time. Whereas if you buy it in the little square packets, they're 99 cents for 3.
Okay. Okay.
99 cents for a batch of bread, whereas here, this will last you, I don't know how long. I've never timed it. And 2/3 of a cup of oil for that is, $3 for a container of oil. I buy my flour at Sharp Shopper, which is cheaper than Walmart. If I were getting it at Walmart, I would get the King Arthur's whole wheat flour and King Arthur's bread flour, and they're $4 and something for 5 pounds. Sharp Shopper is as good a quality or better, and that's 2 something a pound for 5 pounds. So I'm saying I'm saving money if you buy a loaf of bread for $2.50, $3 or more.
Right. And the bread is probably healthier too, because you know exactly what you're putting into it too.
Right, right. The shelf life is not as long. So if you don't eat a lot of bread, you can slice it and put it in the freezer. I'm going to have 12 loaves of bread this morning here. If somebody wants some, they can come get some.
We'll be right
I would
over.
bag it and put it in the freezer. And I won't bake next week. Usually I bake once a week, approximately.
I have a question about, let's see, the flour, if you count that as part of the flour?
The flour that I use to knead is part of, yes.
The total amount of flour, 12 cups, do you subtract the oatmeal from that?
Yeah.
When you're figuring it?
The total amount I use for 6 loaves would be 18 cups. 3 cups to a loaf. Sometimes it doesn't take that much, but I put 12 cups of whole wheat flour in there. I put a cup of oatmeal, that's 13. Then I put 2 cups of, 2 or did I put 3 of white flour? 13, 14, 15, 16. And then what I put in to knead with. And I don't measure that. I just keep coming in, a little handful at a time. So
Sure.
it could be a little under 18. I had a recipe way back when I first started baking bread in the 70s that said put all your dry ingredients in the bowl, spread it out to make a hole in the middle, a well in the middle, pour your liquid ingredients in, and then stir it and knead it. If you do that, you cannot put all 18 cups of flour in there because you don't have anything to knead with, and you've got an awfully stiff dough to start with. So if you do it that way, my suggestion is you would put 12 cups or so of flour in, maybe 2/3 of your flour, and then your wet ingredients, and then start adding to the point of kneading and kneading.
Okay.
I tried it like that recipe said, and it very stiff, dry. So you can't put all your flour and mixture together. You have to save some for kneading. Yeah.
All righty.
So that's all I have to show you. 8 more minutes, and then the oven will turn down, but it'll be another 25, 33 minutes before the bread comes out. So
Awesome.
everybody knows what bread looks like when it comes out.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So, what I'm going to do now is since we've covered everything, I'm going to pause the recording and just I'm going to stop the recording, and then after that, ask you just a few questions off record. So, Sister Joanne, thank you so much for leading out in this demonstration.